And welcome to Find Your Inner Flavor. This is our second episode that we are recording live here at the Gaslight. Live means only if you show up and you're part of the audience. Is it live for you? Otherwise,
it's
you
Facebook
can find
Live.
us on. We're not doing any Facebook Live with any of these things right now. You can find us on iTunes and on YouTube. And we want to thank Com Blue for being the sponsor of this episode and the next few episodes that it is that we're doing.
Oh, I got to put my hand down.
I'm going to do a personal thank you to Chris, our bartender here at the Gaslight, because he's created these phenomenal drinks that we're using Com Blue with.
And super fucked up hungover.
Yeah, he is today.
So kudos to you.
Yeah. So what is Find Your Inner Flavor?
So it's real life, real happiness, real business shit, reading Becky's notes, discovering your inner happiness.
We are the co-owners of Symbol. We're located in Kirkwood, Chesterfield, and St. Charles, Missouri. We focus on lifestyle, healthy food eating. And throughout the last 5 years of owning a restaurant, we have found some interesting customers and employees that walk into our doors. And
Lots
we've kind of taken
people.
this opportunity to create this podcast to talk to them, not only about food, but also about real life stuff. So joining us...
because when people come up, we not only do we help them through their diet or whatever is going on, we find out a lot about who they are.
We oftentimes help them in life in general. And joining us today is Sarah and Wolfy Diggs. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So I want to go back just a couple of years because Sarah was an employee of ours. And Wolfy...
Once upon a time.
Yep, Sarah was once upon a time an employee of ours. She helped us open up our Chesterfield location. We brought her into Kirkwood, trained her there, took her into Chesterfield, and then we met Wolfy because Wolfy was your partner at that time.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well.
Don't be nervous.
I at the time then or like now,
just whenever.
Where you were when we kind of met, because Julie was who introduced us, and you had just kind of came back into the St. Louis area.
So my good friend Julie, I was looking for part-time work with a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, I think.
You were cute as buttons.
Yeah.
Oh, they might have been younger.
They still are.
They're
were
almost
younger
6
than
and 8
that.
now, so I'm trying to figure out years. And so I was trying to find something that my daughter just started school and I couldn't find any jobs. Initially, I wanted to get out of the restaurant business. I'd been working at like 3 AM bars and stuff for a few years, and it was just really taxing, and I couldn't really be my full self, and I didn't feel my potential was being used because I was exhausted all the time. And then I had the kids, and so
they weren't cool with being up at 3 a.m. They love it. Yeah,
they still love waking me up at 3 a.m.
And I want to
but not for the same reasons.
And I want to backtrack just a little bit because we have put a word in as the theme of each one of our podcasts, and your word for this podcast is all about freedom. So we are going to talk a little bit about that and how freedom looks different for other people across the board. So you came to work for us. You were looking for something that was fitting your schedule.
I was looking for something fitting my schedule, and I was actually looking for a community. I was looking to be able to have, really the freedom in a job to be able to be who I was, work when I could, and actually have folks that would understand that sometimes it's hard when you're a young family and trying to keep it all together, and sometimes couldn't find a sitter.
Yeah.
And,
we volunteered to babysit a couple of
times, and the kids have not forgotten.
Oh, I'm sure they
have to ask them when the next time's going to be.
Yeah. They still ask me, like, when are we going to go hang out with your boss?
And, and that's the thing that I think we, as being entrepreneurs and business owners, we were also employees for a really long time, and raising a family and having all of that kind of stuff, you recognize and realize that there is a balance that you kind of want to have in the whole thing. And I've always had and created these mom positions, and those are the ones that drop their kids off at school.
There were
into
quotation
work.
marks around the mom.
The mom, because the mom plays
the
a lot of
podcast people.
I know, yeah, there were. There's a mom role that plays in many different areas. And one, you can be a mom for the employees that are working there, but you're also a mom in general in life.
Right.
And your main priority is your family
Well,
and your
half the
kids.
time you're a mom for the customers too.
Yeah, you're a mom for the customers as well.
That's so true.
So you found your home with us.
I did, and I found a lot of myself through that home. I think that there was, with the community that was created by, at the time Hot Pot originally, and then Symbol, and it was a really, really special time for me, kind of coming into my own voice and understanding priorities, because I was really young when I had my kids. Like there was a lot of stuff that I hadn't quite figured out. And
how old were you when you had?
I was 19 when I had Zoe.
Zoe.
Right. So I basically, I got pregnant right out of high school, and before that, I had spent 2 years in a Pentecostal girls' home.
Wow.
So my life experience was not,
Well,
I
would say it's a norm in a lot of areas. And I think that that's the value that I hope that this podcast brings, is that there is real life scenarios that a lot of people think that they're the only one experiencing these things. And the reality is that there's many more out there that experiencing different things. Wolfie, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, because Sarah came in, but we didn't know she had baggage.
That's not true. I told you guys some stuff from the get-go. I remember my interview.
When Wolfie walked in and we see him and we go,
Oh, shit.
What the fuck is she doing? And then we learned to love Wolfie for many, many reasons. So share with us, Wolfie, a little bit more about who you are and your background.
There's a learning curve with that one. Well, I guess from the point that I came to meet Sarah, ended up leaving a job that could have been a stable career path in Georgia. And I was working for a chiropractor for years and doing that. And it all started adding up a little quick. And Georgia's a little... Well,
Southern.
No bones about it. Corrupt.
It's a little southern.
Well, I mean, they filmed The Walking Dead there, so there's some zombies and all sorts of shit.
Half the people in there didn't even know they were extras.
Oh my god,
that's Georgia.
Yeah.
But it was my exposure to adulthood was okay. Well, I've got this job. This can be great. And Georgia likes to pull people over and do anything to get them paying fines to them. So my first exposure to having a job was paying court fees for a couple of years, and never saw any of the result of it. So kind of got tired of it and didn't want to be bogged down and figured Georgia wasn't the place. This is the Cliff Notes version of that departure. But ended up heading out and deciding that either I needed to find a place or keep moving until I did. And had always wondered what hopping a train would be like. And at that point, I thought there was maybe, having met 1-2 train hoppers at the time, thought maybe I'd run into a couple of them if we happen to be in the same place at the same time. What are the odds? Then found out there's thousands. And that was interesting, and ended up hitting the road and basically learning to embrace certain standards of living that didn't require much padding, didn't require much of anything other than being happy with the fact that it was another day, another chance to have some strange experience, future story to bore people with when I repeat them while I'm drunk, and found a sense of community out there that changed my my entire outlook on things. That I still haven't seen it in a lot of places. Because it was one of those things that you're not guaranteed to see the person you're having a great time with for a week or a month in Austin, Seattle, Bismarck, North Dakota, any random place. There's a good chance, and we've had a lot of friends on the road, whether it's by accident on a train, whether it's other circumstances to do with the lifestyle, that you hear about them, you think you're going to meet up with them, and they're dead by the time you hear about them again.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Did you have a cell phone and internet while you were doing this?
Part of the time, yeah. Part of the time,
But
no.
a lot of the times it was fate that you were coming across somebody that you had crossed paths with at one point, and then all of a sudden here they appear again in a completely different state, in a completely different city at the exact same time.
One of the most common gestures with two hobos meeting each other is a cocked head and squinted eyes.
Pretty sure I think I know you.
Yeah, I think
just,
we're
I mean, just clarifying, we are talking about literally hopping train cars and going wherever that train car is going.
And how long did you do this for?
It was, I think somewhere, it was a little under a decade. For some years in Georgia, I just lived in a car, lived in a shack, and then hopped out, and it was probably around 7 years out there doing that. And it was, and it was everywhere from, it started off like, well, try hopping a train, try hitching, which I didn't even know this was a real thing until it worked. And I thought it would look very cartoonish. And that happened, and then it wound up learning to do something to kill time in between, and brought a guitar and a mandolin. Didn't know how to play a damn lick on anything, but had ample time between places and stuff, and would not have learned to play music if I didn't live on the streets, if I didn't decide that between what little side work I could pick up would be my livelihood. And so then it kind of turned from it started mixing between hopping in some random bus going by, some random car, hopping in a van to do a tour, hopping, any which way. So it just kind of ended up, you just kind of put your little, I don't know, Mary Poppins umbrella out and just blow whichever way it goes and kind of deal with it.
I brought you guys on for this word in many ways. And I think as being entrepreneurs, and so many people that we know being entrepreneurs and trying to go after the next dollar to create the freedom that it is that they're wanting to go after. I've said this to a couple of different people in the past, and one being a previous employee that we had who literally had no home to live in. She was living out of her backpack, trying to figure out what the next thing in her life was going to be and trying to figure out where it was that she belonged. And I said to her, you have all the freedom in the world. You have no responsibility. You have no car payment. You have no house payment. You have no kids. So what do you really want to go do? And she had never traveled the U.S. I'm like going, who do you know that doesn't live here? Go buy a plane ticket and just go.
Go visit.
Go. What do you have to lose at this point in your life? And I think we constantly keep going back to the millennial and trying to figure out, so many of them are trying to figure out where they belong, where it is that they fit in. And there is so much of this trying to discover who they are and feeling lost and then trying to journey out. And that's kind of where you were at, right, Sarah?
Yeah, I think so. There was a switch in mindsets, I think, especially when I started working for you guys, where I realized that a lot of the things that were keeping me from freedom essentially within myself were voices that I'd heard in the past that I identified as my own, but were really things that I was told, frequently. And I think that there's a lot to be said for, especially with the millennial generation, people trying to mold you to think and feel a certain way, and being able to break free of that and identifying who you are is really, really important in that. And that's something that you kind of have to hit rock bottom for a lot of times and realize what's really important, what opinions matter,
Sure. And that's what Find Your Own.
Well, yeah, that's it. Actually, even as far as us as new business owners, I mean, I had pretty much hit rock bottom in the industry before we opened what's now Symbol. I was done. It sucked. I was tired of it. But I still wanted that freedom. And as an entrepreneur, we find freedom, but then we find that freedom comes with its own
responsibilities
price.
That are scary.
It's price, and it's price, and it's there's gives and takes. So for an entrepreneur, freedom is, well, you don't have a boss. It is your hours, but your hours are sucked up for everyone else. For you, freedom was.
Oh my gosh.
Freedom was you had no ties. You did what you wanted to do. You got on. So how do you transition to here and now?
And I know what it's like being a young mom. I mean, I was in my early 20s. I was 21 years old when my daughter was born, and I was not ready for that. And then you're in this whole thing, and then before you know it, I'm 23, and Carlos is mooning me or flashing me out there in the audience. But
there's always one.
Well, I know. There's always that token gay guy that shows up in the middle of the show. But you're sitting there and you're experiencing life, and you're going, okay, now this is where my life is, and I'm this mom, and I'm not ready for it. Yeah. And you're going, I'm lost, I'm confused, where do I belong? And that's kind of where you were at.
Absolutely. And I was still recovering from a lot of situations having to do with the kids and stuff, and breaking free from that part of my life and moving forward was definitely a trip, and Symbol was, definitely one of the best places that I could have ended up. And I honestly think that
No tears. How did you meet Wolfy? I want to go. I want to find out
where.
Let's get to like the juicy stuff.
I'm gonna cry. I was just saying.
Her.
I'm not gonna cry.
I was gonna cry.
You were gonna cry.
For any
this is
reason.
like a little one of those romantic moments where we all come in and we hug.
Kumbaya.
I want to find out about how you guys wound up connecting and meeting, because you're from Georgia. You're from.
It's because I was a total creep, is how we met, actually.
But you had to have ventured out. I mean, you ventured out. You walked away.
I did. And I think that there was a little stint that I did some hitchhiking myself. I had some situations going on that were out of my control, and I didn't know what to do. Honestly, the idea in my head was either tonight I'm going to kill myself, or I'm going to leave with this kid who told me he hopped trains. And that wasn't Wolfy. But there
was somebody else.
There was somebody
that was hopping trains. You were at the point in which I have to choose whether I'm going to live or die. And there's this one person that I know, and you're like going,
I left my apartment full of stuff. Like, I left everything. I locked myself out of my apartment so that I had no choice, in my head I had to just go. And so I actually ended up hitchhiking to Utah, and spending some time there and reassessing life. What do I have control over? What can I change? And I had to physically take myself out of my environment to be able to do that. And it definitely wasn't the most responsible thing to do. It was, in a lot of ways, very irresponsible and dumb. But you did. If I hadn't have done it,
I was gonna say, you're doing what you needed to do to just survive the next day. And I get that. I mean, I had 2 young kids. I was diagnosed bipolar. I couldn't get out of bed sometimes for a week at a time during the month. I was questioning my own motherhood, whether it was good enough, all of these other things. I think that that's where you have to have the appreciation of, we're not the only ones living that. You just chose one avenue. I chose to stay and try and figure things out. Doesn't make it wrong or make it right. You did what you needed to do in that moment.
Well, and honestly, once I got to Utah, I wanted to keep going. I wanted to just leave it all behind. There was a part of me that was like, your kids will be better off without you. You're nothing. It was all those voices that I was talking about earlier that I had identified as my own, but that was things that people had told me.
Sure.
And so as I was planning on my next move, and I was going to hop my first train out of Salt Lake City, Utah, and try and head to Nevada.
Were you with the guy that you knew was hopping trains? Or
I was trying to avoid him at the time,
so you were by yourself.
Yeah, he ended up being a little nutty. I mean, shocking. But, it was yeah. But somebody actually had talked to me. I was at this convention, like a Comic-Con type situation. I was working with some people spinning fire, like helping repair their costumes, so I got free entrance. And a guy that I had told my story, who was from St. Louis, actually ended up, like, without asking me, buying me a bus ticket back to St. Louis. And that was to me, you know, the universe or whatever you call it, that was my sign, like, no, honey, you're not going any farther. You've done what you need to do. You got to go back. And that kind of started a like sort of just like momentum for me to finally be, you know, where I am now, where I'm supposed to be. And there were a lot of things that I had to learn that I don't know that I would have learned as well as I did through that experience.
So talk about the moment you guys met.
I can say from my stance, the state of things at that moment.
I had a couple Red Bulls and vodkas.
All good stories start that way.
And
so I saw him before he ever saw me, and I was at a coffee shop on the Loop, and I saw him down the street, and I was like, "Holy shit, that's the most attractive man I've ever seen."
You probably hear that a lot.
And
I say it in the mirror every morning just to get through the day.
so I told myself, I was like, I'm gonna go talk to him. I'm gonna do it. And then somebody gave me a free beer, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna hang out some more. And it actually ended up taking me, you know, like probably about 4 or 5 hours, and I was up on the Moonrise Hotel, and I looked at my friend. I was like, oh, there's this guy I've got to go talk to. I've got to go talk to him.
Okay,
And
so did you guys meet in St. Louis?
we did. We met on the Loop.
Oh, this is new. I had no idea.
Yeah. So
So you came back to St. Louis, and then you meet Wolfy.
Yes.
There. Okay.
And he was, you were hitching through town, right?
At that point, I had a new dog that followed me home to the punk house I was staying at, and it was raining consistently since I hit the road, so I wasn't going to hop a train with slippery metal and a new dog that wasn't a puppy, that was untrained.
He was so
And
bad.
him's had to adjust to the hard facts of life. He actually would, when we would camp out, I would lay all my clothes and everything down and just lay on the bare ground to be nice to him because he had to walk 15, 20 miles a day with me. And I'd set him up a whole pallet on the ground. But instead, he'd just lay on my chest. And then as one of his haunches would start to slip off, he would look at me like I had hit him. It was the nerve that I would let his haunch fall off of my torso onto the cold padded ground on the pallet that I set up for him. He is a princess, but
Very much so.
that was by the time actually getting up to St. Louis, it was 2 weeks straight of nonstop downpour and all of our busking. It was
You got stuck in Mount Vernon for a little while.
we got stuck in Mount Vernon, which is not a place.
Not a place you really
that-
want to get stuck
it's
in,
not-
huh?
They're not fans of me and my particular road dog at the time. We always said the combination of the two of us looked like Charles Manson traveling with Dennis Rodman. It was an interesting dynamic. Made the South a whole different story. And by the time we'd gotten up here, stuck in this rain, not able to get out and play on the streets because every time we'd start, so we were broker than we normally would be on the streets, and all my shit was mildewed. So I smelled god awful, just
I didn't
mildewed out,
notice.
And Sarah is looking across the bar going, the most
It was a
handsome
sidewalk.
man.
He was standing
It was a
under like a
sidewalk.
street lamp, and I was like,
like, this sounds so romantic all of a sudden.
Yeah.
it was, and
Keep going.
right before she'd walked up, it had been so frustrating and mildewy. And we went out and didn't realize that the Loop wasn't going to be our best bet to really get up the scratch we needed to
Terrible
go ahead and
busking.
keep moving. It was like other towns.
I was going to say, is any place in St. Louis like the right place to?
I won't say it on camera.
Don't want to give away that.
Closely,
that corner.
closely guarded
There are
little
a couple-
spots.
there are a
Making
couple
money playing
places.
music.
There are a couple places, and
So if you ever
know.
see Sarah and Wolfie playing music on the corner, that's the spot.
Keep
That's
it
the
hush
spot.
hush. That's it.
So you guys meet. You guys wind up meeting that night.
I
Did
sought
you-
him out.
Right before we met, I'd like to include this part because it was minutes. It was a half of a cigarette's time that we wouldn't have met. because
One less Red Bull and vodka for me.
And I was frustrated, and I told my road dog at the time, I said,
You told your road dog.
That's-
You were talking to the dog.
oh, well,
This
road,
was your
road pup
there's
and
a-
road dog.
Yeah, road dog
okay.
is like
Oh,
a
hold
human.
on.
yeah,
We
yeah.
need like hashtag road dog. What does road dog mean?
Road dog is just somebody that you're traveling with.
And road pup is.
Something I just made up.
It is, yeah.
Is it
This
an
is my
actual
dog.
Yes.
Is my
But
dog
road
dog.
pup is an actual dog. Road dog is an actual person.
I never
Right.
figure out
That's
what to
your
call the
traveling
road
partner.
ferret
Got
that I
it.
had for a while.
We just
There
need
was-
to. We need
When
to.
you speak hobo.
Yeah, we need to speak hobo.
That's-
We gotta talk.
translate.
We're translating
All right.
hobo to those that are listening.
That's a little more alcohol helps, typically. But at that point, I had told my buddy sitting next to me, I was like, look, I'm done with this night. And people don't realize playing on the streets, you can be a happy, cheery musician, but you've also either got to, if you want to not have to deal with it, it's in some towns, it's handy, like, hey, I'll tip you out a little bit if you keep the people coming trying, because people see a big bucket of money and people want to case it out. So half the time there's playing and kicking somebody in the head at the same time, keeping them away from bending down and grabbing that. It was one of those kind of nights. And people were, look, I'm done with this night. I'm smoking this fucking cigarette. And we are going to sleep under that stair set and leave town tomorrow. Not doing it. I'm done with it. Going to bed. Once I finish this up, we're picking up and going. Right at that, packed up everything, getting ready, just in kind of a sour mood. Just wanted to go sleep in my mildew. And halfway through that cigarette is when she walked up and sat down in front of me and said, I might
I
hang
literally
out.
just
I might
sat
stay."
down in front of him without saying anything until I was like, hi. Like, that was,
That changed the plans of the night.
Okay, so did you ever leave St. Louis?
We did. We
did.
had
You both left.
we went to Louisville to work for a few months. Originally, my plan was to be able to find maybe a better spot for me and the kids than St. Louis, because now I have a much different perspective on St.
Sure.
Louis. But at the
You're
time,
trying to figure out where home is now.
right? Yeah. And so I wanted to see, where I could go where there was, a lot of art and supportive communities and everything. He told me about Louisville. I was like, well, it's 4 hours away. Like, we can use my car. Like, let's go down there.
I offered
And
to
then
kidnap her, and she offered to give me a ride.
That's how I met the lady that actually gave me my wedding dress. And she's one of my best friends now, and so like there was a lot of really awesome things.
I think one of the
that.
things that you guys keep going back to is, yes, we're talking about freedom and experiencing what that is, but a lot of what you guys are experiencing in that moment of freedom is about community. And
I think
where you're
that's
finding that community,
so important.
some find that community in church. You found that on the streets, and it was the strangers that you would meet and the connections and the small moments of time that you had
Absolutely.
with them that you probably had stronger connections with than you ever did in long connections with family or long-term friends or anything like that, is what it is that I continue hearing from you guys.
I think that there's a lot of freedom that resides in community, because you don't really have a whole lot of freedom if you don't feel safe and you don't feel loved. And I think being able to open yourself up, and it takes vulnerability to be open with strangers to create that community. And once you do, there's a hell of a lot of freedom in that.
It is. There is. When you're talking about that, and we talk about this in the restaurants, every time we hire somebody in, we always have this funny little thing. When you start talking about the things that you don't really want anybody to talk about, that's when you know that you've got trust in there, and that's when you
Right.
know that you're creating the community that you want, because those are the people you're working with. And
Exactly.
you guys have been so vulnerable in your story. I mean, I know we knew you because you came to work for us, and then we got to know Wolfy because of you. But there is a rawness about you guys that is free. I mean, there is this thing that so many people will hide behind their stories because they don't want people to know their hidden secrets. And when you can sit down and have a conversation with somebody who's not afraid to hide behind their secrets or the truth behind who they are, there's a piece that becomes really connecting in that moment. And that's, I think, what you guys bring in your connections with people in general.
There's a level of discomfort that we provide. There's a
Well,
So
purposefully
true,
sometimes.
well, and I think, but it's also understanding who you are. You have obviously, Wolfie, became very comfortable in who you are. Probably 10 years living, jumping, train hopping, and all of that kind of stuff that gave you, Sarah, comfortability in meeting Wolfie. Would I be wrong in saying that?
No, and one of the things, like when I met him, I mean, obviously it was just initial like attraction, like that's a super hot guy. But then we started talking, and yeah, I felt like I could be completely honest with him, and I think he was probably the first guy that I completely trusted, you know, in ever. That was one of those things, and even then, the fact that he was so honest with me broke down some of my walls in terms of like, well, shit, I gotta give this a shot.
Well,
like,
if he's being honest, well, I guess I gotta be honest too.
well, and not just that, because my dishonesty at times was not necessarily out of like I want to hide things. It was protection,
Sure.
for me, because I wasn't ashamed of the truth, but I didn't know who to trust
Right.
with it. And that's another thing, going back to community, and I think things like that is like we have such a hard time trusting with our things, and that can prevent us from having freedom in those communities.
So just out of curiosity, Wolfie, because you were talking about meeting other people on the streets, you were meeting somebody for a brief moment of time, possibly never to reconnect with them again. Was there something in that moment that there was this bond that because it was such a brief moment and it was such a strong connection in that moment that you could be vulnerable and just share whatever story it was that you had to share? Like, poof, after I say this, they'll never know me. They may never see me again.
There was a lot of the funny thing about that is it typically went the other way. That was playing on the streets regularly, especially having a dog. People would tip me, ask if I minded if they sat, and hug my dog and cry drunkenly. Typically, you know, some sober people would hug my dog and cry,
But they were usually drunk.
or
that
me.
actually happened in Louisville when we were together.
That was
I saw that in real life.
that was half the time. You'd find, especially, it was different playing. If I was playing solo out on the streets, people would see something. If they'd find out that, oh well, I'm just getting scratched up, getting on. That's it. I'm just going on through, and people would unload a lot of heavy things that nobody around knew, and I frankly kind of clammed up about my things that made me hit the road and everything, the more the underbelly of the truth.
Sure.
Because I at that point I felt no need to talk to anybody about it, because well, I had here to go, I had there to go. But there was always somebody that was coming in, whether it was just to unload an earful and say, safe travels, never see you again, don't want to, you know too much. And it would just be a burden off of them. And it was even people picking up in the times that the times would be forced to hitch, the bull was running too hot in the yard or something like that, and we'd go out and people would pick you up just to let you know. Got a ride with a woman who was drunk off her ass, and I can't help but sound sarcastic in everything I say. And that mixed with her being whiskey drunk and telling us how she was going to shove the receipts of her trip in some man's mouth. I don't know.
We won't ask what details are.
I didn't.
So what that means exactly.
Right.
Unfortunately, I didn't have to ask. She volunteered everything. And then
it's kind
Like a confessional.
I was going to say.
That's pretty much
sounds
it.
like- yeah.
That's how it was when I was hitchhiking too. It was a lot of people don't really want to know so much about you. If you're the one passing through, it's like you're the one that
They can give it to
providing
you, and
yeah.
you're gonna take it with them.
Yeah.
all the way out of town.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
But the thing is the theme in this is that people want to talk.
Yeah.
People want
Yeah.
to share their stories. There is a clearing and a freedom in regards to just doing
Exactly.
those pieces of things. So here we are today. You guys obviously connected. You maybe traveled a little bit, but you guys just recently got married. And
did.
you're in a home and you've got these kids.
And
It's a trip.
and not that, I mean, they're your kids, but I've
Yeah.
seen you with them.
Oh my
and
gosh, it is
they might as
like-
well
Oh, they
be
love
your
him.
kids. Yeah.
They love him.
But how do you go from where you were to
Yeah.
you're a family man?
With great gnashing of teeth occasionally. It was another adventure. Obviously, the factors that made it worth doing were akin to the same factors that made it worth leaving where I was at, leaving a stable place, and then after meeting her and getting to know her, and opening up to her, and then and meeting the kids, and finding out they were pretty cool kids, pretty awesome kids, and which.
Makes it
I'll be
easy.
frank.
Makes it a lot easier.
We might not be if the kids if they were little assholes, it might have been different. I'm just gonna say
They really are sweet.
they are
They're good kids.
they are they make it very easy to love them because they don't have to dumb anything down, don't have to anything, and yeah, after meeting her, it was one of those things that became something that was worthwhile. And originally, and I had told her even originally, I said, well, about a year right now. I was recovering from a motorcycle, the second in a year, a motorcycle accident, and had just got hit and run in L.A. Blah blah blah. Had to hitch back with all my leathers and a ferret, and that was weird. But got back and I told her, I was like, well, look, I'm just healing up the broke parts, and I might be here for a year.
You were going to go to Europe, is what you were.
And then I was
do.
going to go to Europe next, and I said, I'll be here for a year. We'll do this, and then basically we got together and realized that we need to get a place for us and the kids to be, and the first part of that was a lot of it was working for a painting company.
Oof.
The thing that painting not bad, painting all the time.
Yeah.
There are certain people that
Because
can handle
now,
it.
because you wound up getting connected, and now you do all kinds of stuff when it comes to home remodel stuff. So really, where we've kind of came full circle in is that for 10 years you were trying to figure out where you belonged, sensing freedom in having limited commitments of anything. And Sarah trying to discover, where do I belong? Here I have a commitment in regards to my kids and this family and all of this other stuff. And you guys wind up connecting, finding each other. You make home, and you started finding your own community here in St. Louis. And you guys have a really strong community here in your backyard. You got married. Thanks to your
my God.
community.
Well, and I didn't even, that thanks to, yeah, absolutely thanks to our community. And I realized how big our community was. But when people started screaming when I was walking down the aisle, like,
That was nuts.
I can't even explain. Like, I'm getting goosebumps right now. I didn't realize the extent of all of it, and we're so goddamn blessed.
I think that's the thing, though, that we come full circle with in this whole thing is that you can run away trying to figure out who your community is and sensing that what that freedom feels like, or you can choose to stay right here in your backyard. And it really is closer to home than what you may think that it is when you open up to what those possibilities are. And sometimes you've got to run away in order to know to see what is possible.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank you guys. We are going to listen to you guys perform here in just a moment because we love your music. We love seeing you perform.
That's a big part of who you are.
It is a big part of who you are and what it is that you guys are creating right now. We want to take a moment and thank The Gaslight for giving us this amazing venue to record in. Thanks to Mike and Nick behind the cameras. If you're watching us on YouTube, they're the ones that are creating that piece. And we've got Mark over there on sound who's making sure that we sound wonderful. And Chris is stirring up drinks with Calm Blue. Thank you, Calm Blue, Kombucha, for being such a huge part in creating the Find Your Inner Flavor podcast and YouTube video series.
All right.
Okay.
Cheers.
Sounds
All right, thank you all.
out. Now it's up to you guys.
I will say, I love the work these guys do, mainly for the fact that they've been making suggestive gestures at me this entire time.
They were just telling you to F off.
Thank you.
And we got one little snort.
One snort.
There we go. That was a goal.
All right. Cheers.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all.
We gotta get a picture with you guys, and then we're gonna walk out so that they can do
Nope.
a record.
Are we still?
you guys.
Are we still even? Recording?
Won't you sit next to me underneath that old shade tree? Underneath that cold hard ground. If the city's crumbled down, and if they come for us in the middle of the night, put up a fight and put up a fuss, and we'll get back and getting it right. Hey, fall out, Daddy, I got a bunker built for two. Man, when I said I'd spend the apocalypse with you, we'll stay up late at night, basking in your glow that you got from the rumbling ash while we played that it would snow. And if they come for us in the middle of the night, skin 'em and cook 'em and eat 'em alive, and we'll get back to getting it right. Hey, chin up, mama, well, I found us a little jug of irradiated homemade wine to have a steak from a 10-foot bud. And for our romance, I won't need no candlelight. If we get close to the someplace where we have a fireplace, and if they come for us in the middle of the night, fill 'em full of holes before they can scream, and we'll get back to getting it right. Can't buy you a diamond ring, but I'll make you an armored suit. Take you out to the opera house to forage and a shoot, where we'll have a mud puppet dog with a breed for each of his head. And when it's done chewing off skull, he'll climb right into bed. And if they come for us in the middle of the night, they'll ask about us like get 'em a snack, and we'll get back to getting it right. Well, hey, Ragamama, won't you sit next to me? Oh, yup, a piece of grass underneath that old shade tree. Hey, fall out, Daddy, I got a bunker built for two. Man, and when I say I've been the apocalypse with, yeah.